Years after the EU's expansion, Europe seems to be united, but in reality a social iron curtain is dividing the East and the West. Euronews visited the Union's richest and poorest member countries to find out the reasons behind the economic differences and to see what Brussels could do to fight poverty. We're in Sofia, and the busiest shopping street in the Bulgarian capital. But just a few kilometers away from those luxury shops is Sofia's biggest Roma neighborhood. It's home to 30,000 people. Unemployment and poverty are both very common here. If you don't have a job, you still have to support yourself. Some people pay for things, but others only steal, sucking our blood. The police sometimes pretend to do something about it. But the neighborhood, Faculteta, is changing slowly. Elena Kavakcheva's Health and Social Development Foundation has been working here for the past 15 years.
The age of marriage increased from 14 to 16 to 18 to 20, so the average age for marriage. Children, the school dropout is much less in this neighborhood than it used to be before these services.
The foundation provides a kindergarten and social and health skills for young mothers. But Elena thinks it will take generations to fight the poverty problem here.
All experts in this field actually are convinced that this should be long-term measures.
Bulgaria's economy collapsed after the fall of communism. The average monthly income here is just over 330 euros. Meanwhile, corruption and organized crime pose a systemic problem.
The corruption in Bulgaria is like a cancer for all the society.
We travelled to the Black Sea coast with Asen Yordanov, an anti-corruption campaigner who's fighting to preserve some of the last remaining natural beaches here. Those who bought this formerly protected land made 40 million euros in profit.
Making the constructions is not the way of developing the country and developing the tourism. That's the way to give a chance to some oligarchic, mafiotic structures to fill their pocket.
With living standards failing to improve, support for the EU has fallen since Bulgaria joined 7 years ago.
They expected much more on the social side, which is not the case. But especially young people, entrepreneurs, etc., etc. I mean, young scientists, they know very well what the European Union is bringing to them.
Maria Angelova was one of them. She edits the country's second largest travel website.
Now I can see that there are many things that are changing and many European money being invested in nice projects and I think step by step, very slowly, things will get better.
Meanwhile, in Luxembourg, people earn an average monthly salary of 3,200 euros. It's the second richest country in the world after Qatar. With a population of just 520,000, Luxembourg is one of Europe's main financial centres.
What is the biggest problem in Luxembourg now?
The biggest problem? Actually, I've been living here for several years right now, and I'm really enjoying it, so I don't see any problems.
The biggest problem? Yes. I don't see any problem. It's quiet, it's well organized, everything is well organized, and it's a pleasure to live and to work in this country.
We asked a professor at the University of Luxembourg about the reasons for the country's success.
First, it found a niche, and it created a niche economy for itself, which is banking. Second thing is that Luxembourg focuses on stability, not just growth, which means that there is a very strong middle class in Luxembourg.
What is the reason behind the extreme poverty of some regions in Europe?
And these regions in Europe that you're citing are regions where the middle class is suffering significantly, and it's falling behind, and it's actually getting smaller. They remain economic regions that are tied to manufacturing, tied to construction, tied to industry, and as a result, they're lagging. Those are the sectors where unemployment is increasing the most, in fact, in the European Union.
Do you think that corruption is a factor behind poverty?
I do think that corruption is a factor, but it's not simply kickbacks or bribes. When we talk about corruption, we're also talking about informal networks that influence how leaders make rules. A lack of state regulation, you're talking about a lack of confidence in the state, you're talking about a disconnection between states and markets. That creates parallel societies. When citizens are working in parallel societies, they're at risk, they're vulnerable, and that creates poverty.
Do you think that the European Union was successful in fighting these social gaps in Europe?
The European Union has invested a great deal in infrastructure. Now, the problem has been, while they've created infrastructure, they have not necessarily been able to create some of the, to address some of the more structural problems in these areas, such as informality.
What else should the European Union do in the future in this particular field?
The key to addressing poverty, if you're looking at it as a structural issue, is reinforcing the middle class. So that means trying to create equitable development. 52 million Europeans don't have bank accounts. They don't have access to bank accounts. This is something that the European Union is now beginning to address, the right to have a bank account. It is impossible to rise out of poverty, or it is impossible to establish a strong middle class when bank accounts are not accessible, or when it's not possible to get loans, for example, or access to credit.